Sorry. Probably fired up too early. All right. 3, 2, 1. No. All right. Try it again. If not, I'm going to leave it, open up a new one. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dill, Jim Nagy, the Oklahoma Sooners, they continue to be the program that is most fascinating to talk about when it comes to talent acquisition, roster building. They're doing it a little bit of a different way. Like, there are a lot of Power 4 programs, the bluest of bloods, that are throwing a lot of money around at the high school ranks. Jim Nagy kind of pivoting and saying, hey, we going to throw some money around. We going to throw that money around in the transfer portal. We're going to grab guys out of the high school ranks that are kind of the diamonds in the rough. And Dill, we kind of got the sense that Jim Nagy was doing that. It came out and was pretty clear. Hey, we're looking at the guys that we don't have to get into bidding wars to acquire out of the high school ranks. Tyler Ruxer committing to Oklahoma. Like, this is a Jim Nagy kind of guy, 3-sport athlete, developmental prospect, has a really, really high upside in my opinion, but a guy that won't get on the football field as a freshman, maybe even a sophomore. That's the strategy. You look at a team like Texas Tech spending a lot of money to land the commitment of a guy like Felix Ojo. Dill, look, Felix Ojo, I think, has a great opportunity to be a future top 5 NFL draft pick, but at the end of the day, I'm probably not going to get on the football field year 1, year 2. I don't think Jim Nagy's interested in getting to a bidding war, paying upwards of over $1 million annually for a player that might only play 1.5 years for you. Jim Nagy's going to try to find value at the high school ranks. They're going to use their money, but they're going to use their money in the portal for guys that, hey, we know what we're getting for our dollar, where it's very hard to say that when you're recruiting these guys out of the high school ranks. It's different, but it's really fascinating. And hey, we're going to kind of figure out how that's going to play out over the next couple of years. Want to get into Tyler Ruxer, talk about the overall roster building strategy that Jim Nagy and Oklahoma are kind of carrying out. I think it's very clear that Jim Nagy has control of what the talent acquisition looks like, because it looks a little bit different than what Brent Venables was doing with this roster the last couple of years. Fired up to get into it. Before we do, and as always, to the Oklahoma fans, let it fly in the comment section. Dill, we don't necessarily agree totally on Oklahoma's roster building strategy, so we'll probably get into it a little bit. I'm sure, if you're an Oklahoma fan watching this in the middle of July, you probably got some takes too. Let in the comment section. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Dill, let's start with Tyler Ruxer, and we'll kind of work our way into this roster building strategy that we're seeing Oklahoma play out with. Tyler Ruxer coming to Oklahoma. How are we feeling about it?
Well, I mean, he's kind of emblematic of the guy that, frankly, Oklahoma's targeting.
Yes, agreed.
Even look, even if you just look across the recruiting services rankings and how very different evaluations. On3's got him at only 164 in the country. The other services basically saying he's barely a D1 football player. So I think that's kind of common, frankly, across the Oklahoma recruiting class, let's say. But Tyler Ruxer, I mean, he is what he is, a very probably physically underdeveloped tight end in terms of the size you're looking for, but a really, really smooth athlete, really functional, and really good hands. You look at the way he can catch the ball through traffic, make things happen. There are those things you love about him. You just, again, needs a lot of development, which is not necessarily a bad thing for guys out of high school. But
I'll say this, Dill, I like taking developmental prospects at the tight end position. Hey, you can be as developed as you want at the tight end spot. Chances are you ain't playing year 1. So if I'm grabbing tight ends, I'd rather get a guy that, hey, we don't have to go and spend a ton of money for, but it's going to be a developmental guy. That's Tyler Ruxer. 6'4", 220, reports an 11-1 in the 100-meter dash. It's a big body that can cook. But Dill, I would echo what you said. Really natural coordinated athlete, which is not always the case when you're talking about these tight ends out of high school. They might be big, they might be able to run in a straight line, but when it comes to creating some separation, when it comes to being a fluid route runner that can create separation, not a lot of tight ends have it. Tyler Ruxer's a big body that moves like a wide receiver, but has the frame of a tight end. Now he's got to fill that frame out, especially playing in the SEC where you're going to be asked to be an inline run blocker. Dill, I think he's a tight end that can offer you some high upside pass catching juice at the tight end position that Oklahoma hasn't had since what, Braden Willis in 2021, 2022, whenever he graduated. I'm really excited about what this kid can be over the next couple of years. It ain't going to be immediately year one, but there's some upside here, which ushers us into a conversation where, Dill, there's just not a ton of the big marquee names that are committed to Oklahoma in the 2026 cycle outside of a guy like Bo Bentley. I'm going to give you the T-box, and I think it's pretty clear now because Jim Nagy has come out and talked about it. Hey, we are going to try to find value. We're going to try to find those diamonds in the rough at the high school ranks and then kind of be aggressive monetarily in the portal. What is your overall take on the roster building strategy that we're seeing play out in Norman, Oklahoma?
Well, I'm frankly okay with that because that is where Jim Nagy cut his chops. I mean, that's
Agreed.
what he does. He is an evaluator.
Agreed.
That's how he got to where he's at in this lifetime, is being able to identify guys who were underappreciated, whether that was in the college ranks, whether that was in the pro ranks, and get something out of them.
And
So
he always did a good job. Sorry to cut you off. That's my fault. But he always did a good job of it, Dill. Like when he was the director of the Senior Bowl, they'd be taking these guys. I mean, the name really
like
long.
a Jake or that Fisher, Eric Fisher, the tackle out of Central Michigan. Like nobody knew who he was, and he became 1-1 overall in the draft out of Central Michigan. Just a guy like, again. So I like that Jim Nagy's leaning into what he does. The only caveat is that when they take their swings, and they're going to have to take some swings in the high school ranks, and Bo Bentley was a swing, and like they definitely had to go compete very aggressively with LSU, who also very much needed Bo Bentley. When they take their swings for guys like Jake Cruel, Davian Gross, that type of name, they need to be able to hit, because I don't think you can only operate out of the transfer portal. You probably do need some real high-end talent coming out of high school as well.
Yeah, Dill. So in the way I look at Jim Nagy's roster building strategy, there's pros and cons like there are for any roster building strategy. And what's unique about it is it's hard to evaluate because the transfer portal is so new, NIL is so new, revenue share is so new. So there's not a ton of sample size of like, hey, Jim Nagy's way, does it work? Does it not? We just haven't seen many programs do that. Here are the pros. The pros are that I think your money is going to be best spent. You know, like at Texas Tech, grabbing a guy like Felix Ojo, paying him over $1 million a year for the next 3 years before he goes off to the NFL. All right, you're exposing yourself to some massive upside, but you're also exposing yourself to like a lot of money kind of flying out the window. Because at the end of the day, whether you got 5 stars next to your name, whether you got 3, it's always a little bit of a projection in terms of what these kids are going to be when they come from the high school ranks to the collegiate ranks. Look, there are 5-star busts all the time. And so allocating your money to a guy like John Mateer, or, you know, more importantly, since Jim Nagy came in, a guy like Jaden Ott. You know, you went out and got real aggressive to go get Jaden Ott and add him to this roster. Look, you know what you're getting. Like when Jaden Ott's been healthy at Cal, he's been one of the best running backs in the country. There's no projection there. You know, if you get a healthy Jaden Ott in 2025, you're getting one of the better backs in the country. So you know that your money's going to be well spent. Here are the cons, and I think you kind of talked about it too. At certain positions, there's just not going to be those kind of football players routinely. More importantly, you're just not sure what's going to be in the portal. Hey, we're going to go out and get a tackle in the portal, plug and play tackle. Well, what happens if they ain't going to be a tackle in the portal? Well, you kind of got yourself in the pickle if you've ignored it at the high school ranks. When it comes to elite caliber edge rushers, when it comes to elite caliber tackles, 2 of the most important positions, especially in the SEC, it's very hard to get those kind of players in the portal. Will Oklahoma be able to do a good enough job addressing those positions on their roster in the transfer portal is probably one of the concerns you have with the Jim Nagy method of roster building.
Well, and that's why I say you got to take some swings. Like the high school class needs to have a couple of Bo Bentleys each year. I don't think you can be like they can't finish at number 40 in the high school recruiting rankings, I don't think, and build sustainable championship teams. They can be probably hovering in that 20 range,
20.
I think.
Yeah.
That'd be pretty appropriate. Again, you're not taking five-star kids, but you got to take probably a couple of those five
And
high
Dill,
prospect.
it has to be at those positions I just named, at least in my opinion, because those are the positions. Look, if you just don't want to recruit wide receivers out of high school, I get it. You won't be able to grab some good wide receivers in the portal, which you can't find are your Michael Fasusis. I think if you are going to swing hard at top prospects, and if you're only going to take a swing at a couple of them, in my opinion, it has to be along the lines of scrimmage. Because I look at Oklahoma and say, all right, you got 2 offensive linemen committed. I like them both, Noah Best, Deacon Schmidt. I don't think either of them are going to be tackles. Noah Best for sure, Deacon Schmidt, borderline. Can you find capable SEC tackles in the portal consistently? Is probably the conversation that you want to start having. Now, you saw them last year, take a guy like Foji and take a guy like Fasusi. That's what you need. In my opinion, my biggest concern is those premium positions that are hard to address in the portal. If you are not going to spend at the high school ranks, are you going to be good enough at those positions? And can you backfill those kind of positions in the transfer portal? That probably
And
remains to
that's
be
what we'll
seen.
see, because I do get the sense that Jim Nagy's okay to take swings at the high school ranks. Like, again, Bo Bentley is a very clear swing. I think what
Yep.
they're doing to land Jay Cruel is a very clear, very aggressive swing. So, again, I'm okay with like being very calculated and only
Yeah.
swinging for your most highest conviction guys. Like, there are clearly some teams out there that are not swinging at their high conviction guys. They're swinging at anyone with talent. And again, I'm not even going to hate on that methodology because
Agreed.
it's worked for teams like Georgia and Alabama for a
Sure.
long time. But in this era, I'm okay with Oklahoma blazing a bit of a trail. But again, there needs to be 4 to 5 guys, I think, who are real high caliber football players in the high school ranks. It can't only
Yeah,
be fringe fours and mid
you
threes.
have to expose yourself to the upside. You have to, right? And that's probably where you like. Here's what I'll say. I don't see many PJ Adibars coming to Oklahoma relatively soon. The guys that are big time projections, it's going to take multiple years. I just don't see Jim Nagy saying, hey, PJ Adibar, we're going to pay you. And I'm just taking numbers out my butt here, but $700K for the next 3 years to come to Oklahoma when you know damn well he's not going to be a year 1 guy. Maybe it's a little bit of year 2, but he ain't going to be a year 2 guy either. I think the guys that Oklahoma wants to add to their roster, Jay Cruel's a perfect example. Dude, Jay Cruel, wherever he goes, he's going to play relatively early. He's one of the more polished up day 1 ready prospects in the class. That's what I think Jim Nagy is going to do. I don't think you're going to see those wild projections with a guy like PJ Adibari. Hey, if we're going to go pay for a guy at the high school ranks, we're going to know we're going to be convicted that they're going to be good football players, and we're going to be convicted that they're going to be good football players relatively early. And then the rest of the guys, like a guy like Tyler Ruxer, hey, you ain't shelling out a ton of money for Tyler Ruxer. You didn't beat out Duke and West Virginia by paying a lot of money. Say, hey, we'll get him and we'll see what he looks like in 3 years, but we're not going to put a ton of money to these guys that you're just not sure where they're going to be at the college landscape, which kind of like when you get into NIL and revenue share where, look, you're on a budget and you just got to figure out how you want to allocate your resources. There's a lot of interesting teams to monitor over the next couple of years, Dill. I don't know if there's one that's more interesting than Oklahoma.
He's bucking the trend hard because you still see most of the big dogs swinging at everyone and trying to pull in top 10 classes. And
Yeah.
again, that still is in my brain the way to do it, but
we
we'll
don't
see,
know
because
it's so new. And Dill, here, I mean, I'll give you one example, like Ole Miss, kind of like that. They're not going to recruit outside the top 50, hovering around top 20 at the high school ranks. But hey, we go and get aggressive with our resources in the portal. And I don't know if it's going to be sustainable. But one thing I do know is that Ole Miss team in 2024, that had national championship potential. That was a roster that if you told me they were holding the trophy at the end of the year, I wouldn't have been surprised. It's one of the best rosters in all of college football. Now, can Ole Miss compete for national championships every single year for the next 5 is a question that we're going to find out pretty damn quick. We'll pause there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.